Well, welcome, Reonna, to the Lessons of a Lashpreneur show. Thank you so much for coming on. So I would love to know how you went from being a hairstylist to an attorney, because that's not the normal career path from getting certified cosmetology license to then going into law school.
Right. I think I'm one of probably not very many. Right?
One of one.
One of one, maybe even. Yeah, so I always had a desire to like for the beauty industry, the hair, the nails, the glam of it all.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, I kind of went through a phase when I was like, I just don't really want to do any more education. So I did a regional occupation program at my high school in California. It's called ROP. And cosmetology was one of the things they offered. So I took those as my elective credits and then ended up taking, I'm not licensed anymore in nails, but I got my manicuring first. And then after that went on to get my full-blown cosmetology. And I kind of did that for most of, the end of high school. I was licensed at 16 in nails. So as soon as you could get licensed for the state, I was licensed. And then I was licensed for hair at 17. So I did that for a little while and then kind of was taking classes on the side. And then eventually, went on to go get my bachelor's and then go to law school. And the beauty industry and, my Cosmo really helped me the whole way. Because anybody in the beauty industry knows you get to make your own schedule. It's one of the few jobs where you really can be your own boss. You can make your hours. You don't have to, I didn't have to work school around Cosmo. Cosmo worked itself around school. So
I love that. So it actually supported you to be able to go to law school.
Yes, for sure.
So let's dive into some of the specific questions I think would be relevant for the listeners. Let's talk about policies and waivers and how legally binding are they? And what are some best practices to make sure that your policies and waivers are legally binding or enforceable?
So for policies and waivers, in California and in many states, most states in the United States, you can really contract for anything. And, some contracts have to be in writing and they're obviously way better in writing, but your policies and your waivers, you want to make sure that policies are being posted on your website, on your booking site. One of the things I always tell people is you can't enforce your policies if you can't prove that they were known, So I always say, put them everywhere, put them on your website, put them on your Instagram. Everyone's doing a lot of marketing nowadays with Instagram. So put it there, put it on your booking. If you have one of the best features for a lot of the booking sites is kind of that little pop out checkbox that comes up. And it's like, I have read and understand, the policies of the Lashpreneur, and agree to these terms. Okay, well, now you have a checkbox that they popped up and they had to check, and say that, yes, I'm going to, be bound by these terms and conditions. And then when you're sending out reminders, like at your reminder text or however you do it at the bottom of those saying, the Lashpreneur has a 24-hour cancellation policy, all of those things in there. So they're reminded several times that these are the policies. Another thing I tell people to do is when you're initially onboarding a new client, have them fill out their intake forms and things that people kind of put by the wayside, after a while, like after you've been in the business for a while. Sometimes people kind of push the business side of it out, but especially with lashes and hair things and things that require chemicals, that's where you really see those reactions, eye allergies with lashes or some type of adverse chemical reaction with hair color and things like that. And if you're having them do that intake form in the beginning, then they're understanding the risks involved and you have them sign that. And that doesn't even have to be in person anymore. There are so many ways to have all of that automatic as well, filling out their waivers and their forms and signing it and then uploading it and saving it in a file specifically for that client.
Yeah, because you need to be able to pull up that document and show proof. Especially, I run into this a lot where people are like, their clients get upset if they post a photo of them that they didn't get express permission for. And oftentimes what we teach in our business coaching program is to get the client's consent for any photos to be used for marketing. If they choose not to, they choose not to, and you can't use the photo. But I've had clients where we posted a before and after and they didn't like the before and they got all upset. Like, I didn't give you permission. I'm like, actually, I have your signature here, and you pull it up and you show them. But even if somebody, you know, has an allergic reaction and they need to be able to go to the doctor, even having something like an MSDS sheet, the material safety data sheet, that informs the doctor what chemicals are on the person's face or on their hair or whatever, can help a lot in helping to minimize people getting upset or having adverse reactions or long-term, you know, scarring or anything like that. But yeah, I agree. Like, having a way to document a client's agreement to something, especially if it's as easy as that little checkbox. Now, we all know most people don't read contracts, but it's not up to you to enforce that they read the contract. It's just up for you to put it out there that they have agreed that they've read the contract, whether they did or not. The policies still apply.
Acknowledgement and acceptance, right? So what you touched on a minute ago was a photo consent release. And that's one of the things that I keep telling people all the time. I'm like, okay, so you got a really good before and after of, you know, eyelashes, or, you know, another one that's real big right now is like the microblading eyebrows. Like, you've got no eyebrows before and these amazing, you know, very natural looking eyebrows later. Well, maybe you decide that you're going to use those photos for your marketing now, and you get a bunch of pamphlets made. You have this web designer do a great, you know, web design. Maybe you even get like those huge retractable, you know, banners for trade shows, all that stuff.
Thousands of dollars on ads.
Yeah, thousands of dollars on ads. And then here comes Sally Sue, you know, who's like, I did not, like, Sally's real upset that you used her photos. If you don't have a consent, you know, for a photo release, then yeah, you can be in some hot water. You're probably going to need to rebrand, you know, remarket, you know, as far as that goes.
Yep,
if you have right, wasting lots of money. If you have a consent form that they've signed that said like, yes, you know, you're free to use my before and after pictures, then you're like, okay, well, I'm, you know, very nicely, right? However you want to say it. Like, I understand that you don't really like the before picture, but I think it shows an awesome transformation, and that's what I want my other clients to see. And, you know, we talked about this, you signed the consent form. So, you know, next time that I run out of pamphlets or, you know, redo some of the ads, I will, you know, switch it out. But for right now, it's going to stay. And you can stand on that leg because you have that, you know, photo consent. Same thing with testimonials. You know, I think people forget about that too. But if you're getting testimonials and you're going to publish it on your website or, you know, in some type of form or fashion, it's good to have one of those as well.
Awesome. That's a great tip. Yeah. Even if you're going to share somebody's Yelp review, don't you have to have permission from them, right?
You should have permission from them, you know, for their testimonial. You know, if you get into the habit of doing all of that stuff at one time when you first onboard a client and you're like, hey, I'm going to get a photo consent release and this and that, then you're done and you don't have to think about it. Yeah. You know, so.
So one thing that comes up oftentimes is somebody stealing somebody's Instagram photos, and the person finds out and gets all upset about it. Maybe they, you know, repost it as their own without giving credit, or they put it on a website. Is there some sort of copyright infringement? Is it worth pursuing legally somebody who steals your material? Is it just kind of a waste of time? Like, what's your take on content being stolen on social media?
You know, it's hard, I would say, because with social media, everything is everywhere, you know, but, you know, bottom line is if it's a photograph you've taken, right, or content you created, then it is copyright infringement if someone is blatantly like taking it. There are ways that you can work around that as far as, you know, if it happens, to make it either not so expensive or, you know, less on the legal side. But, you know, you can always reach out to Instagram and say like, hey, this is my stuff. You know, it had this watermark, they're using it, you know, please take it down. You can go the nice route of, you know, sending a DM saying like, hey, this is my photograph that I took. This is copyright infringement. I've asked Instagram to take it down. You know, if it doesn't get taken down or removed, I'm going to have to pursue legal action. One of the cool things is, you know, just to have in your stack as a business owner is a cease and desist letter. Yeah. You know, and that's one of the things I think people don't think about, but as part of, I'm actually getting ready to do a whole like beauty bundle thing. And, It's going to have contracts and things of that nature regarding the beauty industry, like the professionals. You know, I feel like cosmetologists in the beauty world is operating in like a little bit of an unknown area, you know, with Instagram and all of this stuff kind of being so prevalent just not that long, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm going to have all this stuff. I'm going to have the client consent forms. I'm going to have the photo release, photo testimonial, a cease and desist letter, like a sample one, where it'll just kind of be plug and play, you know? So it'll be like, hi, Lashpreneur, you know, my name's Reonna Green. I, you know, own the Lash Boss, blah, blah, blah. I see that you're using my, you know, photograph that was posted on such and such date. So, you know, it'll just kind of have the areas for you to fill in. And then it'll say like, you know, I, you know, did not give permission for you to use this content in this way on your platform. Please remove it. If it's not removed within the next, however long you like, it'll be like insert date here, right? Within the next 48 hours or whatever it is. I'm going to pursue legal action for copyright infringement.
And oftentimes cease and desist is just enough, because for the most part, people who are doing that kind of thing aren't really trying to do it necessarily maliciously. They may just see something they think is cool and they post it, but they don't realize that there are ownership rights that are involved there. And I think this is a great segue into trademarks, because that happens a lot too, is somebody's like, oh, well, why wouldn't I be beautylashes.com, or why wouldn't I be Fabulash, without ever researching if somebody already has a stake in that ownership of that name. So can you talk about how also trademarks would fall into that you own the business name, and why you just pulling a name out of a hat without researching if it's actually trademarked or not is probably not the best idea?
Yeah, a real bad idea. Actually, yeah. So, you know, you kind of touched on it. I like to say what you said, you know, brand ownership. I always say people who are building brands and are owning businesses, you can own a business and not necessarily own your brand, right? And what I mean by that is, if I'm in the state of California and I am going by, just for example, the Lashpreneur, you know, in California, and I don't have it trademarked, but that's my business name. Maybe I even have an LLC under the Lashpreneur, you know, and I'm working, my money's going through my LLC, and I think that I own my business. No, you're renting your business. And so I'm always like, no, you don't own your business. You are renting your business, you know, or your brand, until somebody else comes along and decides they really want to own it. And when you really want to own your business or own your brand, that's when you trademark. And there's a difference between state trademarks and federal trademarks. And just the difference is, if I'm the Lashpreneur in California, well, then nobody else in California can use the name Lashpreneur. But you know, I live in Southern California. We are real close to Vegas, where I live. And, you know, probably about a 2.5 hour drive. You can have a Lashpreneur pop up in Vegas, right? And so if I was using that name for my lashes and lashing in SoCal, and somebody started lashing in Vegas and they thought it was the same person or same company, or that we were affiliated some way, and they go and they have a horrible experience in Vegas, well, then that looks bad on me and my brand, right? And so that's kind of the example of, you can get protected in California with a California state trademark, but that doesn't protect you in Las Vegas, Nevada. Right. So the federal trademarks will give you rights in all of the states. So if somebody does pop up, you know, with the Lashpreneur in Nevada, you can be like, yeah, no, sorry, I own this name, I own this brand, and you're going to confuse the consumers. And so I need you to stop using it, you know?
Yeah, because you don't have rights to that name because somebody else has
right.
said. Right. Okay. So let's talk about the trademark process. Like, when does it make sense for somebody to get a trademark? And then what is the process? Do they have to hire an attorney? How do they go about all of that? Even just like researching if a name is trademarked or not.
Yeah. So the easiest way to, okay, I'm going to start first with when I think it's appropriate for people to trademark.
Great.
I always say, as a new business owner, entrepreneur, I think that new business owners put their money into areas at first that they don't necessarily need. So you think, okay, I'm going to start a business, I need clients. And so your first step is like logo, or your first step is logo and then a website or ads or whatever. But I think it's important. What'd you say?
A boosted post.
A boosted post, right? And I think it's important to remember that, like, if you're building a house or, you're building a business, you have to start with a solid foundation. And so I think legal is your solid foundation. I think, trademark before you buy the domain name, trademark before you, snag your Instagram handle, before you pay $1,000 or more for somebody to design a logo for you. You need to put your money into the legal side and make sure that, your trademarks are on point, contracts you're going to use for, your independent contractor doing your logo design, all of that stuff's on point. So that's kind of the first half of the question. The second half of your question was, how can somebody look and see if something is trademarked? Well, it's kind of a two-part question. So you can go onto the uspto.gov website and you can do a basic trademark search. So you can go type in the Lashpreneur and you can see what pops up.
That's the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, right? USPTO.
Yes,
okay.
USPTO, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And you could type in a simple search, the Lashpreneur, and see what comes up. Now, the problem with that is it is only going to show you things that how you specifically searched it. So the best example of this is Starbucks. If I go in and type into the USPTO website, Starbucks, and put 2 S's on the end, it's going to show that that name is free and that I can trademark it, Yeah. Problem is you go and try to do that, and any examining attorney that looks at your application is going to be like, yeah, no, Starbucks with 1 S is going to be real mad if I approve this trademark application, right? Also too confusingly similar to the real Starbucks. So they wouldn't, approve it. So sometimes people will be like, well, I'm just going to trade, I'm going to do this search. I'm going to trademark it myself. Well, that's when they end up, getting hit with office actions, which is basically a refusal. It's a preliminary refusal of your trademark. Or, they end up registering in the wrong class, because with trademarks, you only own your name in relation to the goods or services that you're selling.
Yeah.
So, you can do
doing Dove chocolate.
Yes, that's a good one. Dove chocolate and Dove, deodorant, or Dove soap. They are the exact same name, but they're in 2 different lanes. So as long as they're staying in their lane, they're not infringing on anybody else's right. But if Dove chocolate decided they were going to come out with, I don't know, some type of like deodorant or body wash, they're outside of their lane. So then there would be some issues with that. But it doesn't even have to be the exact name, as long as it will confuse the consumer. It's a no-go. So, that's kind of why it makes it a little bit tricky. Or for example, you might not even know what area you need to register in. So you might think like, you know what, I'm going to register the Lashpreneur for clothing. I want to start selling merchandise, right? And you're like, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to register in the category for apparel. But then you also decide that as part of that, you want to sell maybe backpacks or something, or, tote bags.
Oh, you're ruining all my plans. Don't release them yet. Just kidding.
And, you want to sell tote bags or backpacks. Well, guess what? That's a different category. And so that kind of goes to why you really need to make sure that if you're, trying to do it your DIY, which I don't recommend, that exactly which merchandise that you're selling and what category it's in. Otherwise you are not protected.
So if I'm translating this into like how does a lash artist or a beauty service-based business owner go about it? They would trademark for their service-based business in eyelash extensions or hair. But if they wanted to have an e-commerce platform, that would be a separate trademark or an additional category under the trademark.
Yeah, it would be an additional category under the trademark.
And if they were going into education, that might be a different one. The way that I look at it is every time you start a different branch of your business. So if you're, the Lashpreneur, as I provide lash extensions, but then I go into education and online marketing and sell online products, I'm really starting a different business. I'm just using the same name. So the government is going to see it as almost 2 different businesses or the trademarks, even though I classify it as one business because it's me doing both, but really they're 2 separate businesses because they're 2 separate audiences.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
So, in your example for the Lashpreneur, if you're doing eyelash extensions under one thing, yes, it would be a services, based category. Then if you're, now all of a sudden you are coaching new lash artists on it and you have a coaching platform, well, you're going to need, either your YouTube or your entertainment services, your coaching services, area for that as well. And then if you decide you're going to do merch, you're going to, do that under the merchandise as well. And then maybe you decide that you're going to do, eyelash shampoo and, eyelash brushes and things like that. Well, that's going to be under a separate category as well.
Got it. So how does a lawyer come into play with establishing a trademark initially?
So, how it works typically is you're like, I've got this great name and I want to register it. What do I do? Well, for me, I set people up with a consultation. Let's talk about what your brand is. Let's talk about where you see your brand going so that I can get a better idea of, what you might need to trademark now, what you might need to trademark in the future, that type of thing. How most attorneys do it is you're going to do your search and your opinion first. And so what that means is I take your name, the Lashpreneur, and I do a comprehensive search. So it's more than typing it on the USPTO website, right? It's actually a comprehensive search. It's going to search the USPTO website. It's going to search domain names, Instagram, social media, state trademarks. And it's not just going to search for just the Lashpreneur, but it's going to search for anything that might be confusingly similar. What my job is to do is to go through and think like, oh, okay, well, the Lashpreneur and the, beautypreneur, let's say, they're similar, but, arguably different enough that you're not going to confuse, whoever your consumer is. But it'll be like that times 400 pages, depending on
like
what your brand is.
Entrepreneur might be a little bit confusing, or
yes.
Lashpreneur that's spelled wrong because people spell it wrong all the time. Yeah.
Entrepreneur is a tricky word to spell,
A lot of E's, weird EU situation.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's get into Instagram questions on Instagram stories. I mentioned I was having this conversation with you and we got some questions. So Beauty by T asks, what's the best way to protect my business legally?
So I would say 2 ways, contracts and trademarks. One of the things with your contracts, and when I say contracts, I mean, generally speaking, for the beauty business, your client services contract, your client waiver, your treatment waiver, your, photo release waiver, your COVID waiver, especially in today's age, beauty services are optional, so they're not mandatory. We're going in, beauty services are done in close proximity to other people. You don't know where they've been and they don't know where you've been. And the chances of, contracting COVID in these situations is higher. So, making sure you're kind of covered with all of those bases, making sure that if you're an independent contractor working for somebody else in their business, that you have a really solid independent contractor agreement with your salon. What you're supposed to do and what the salon owner is responsible for as far as everything. I mean, cleaning, when rent's due, on what days it's due. And so, things like that on the legal side of the contract side, protecting yourself with your independent contractor and your relationship and agreement with your salon suites or your salon owner or whatever. And then on the client side, making sure that your policies are in place and you're not getting chargebacks and that you have signatures and acknowledgements. And then on the other business side of it, I would say your trademarks, ownership is where it's at, right? And so if you are building a brand, even if it's a small brand, but you expect that it might get large one day, you want to make sure that you're building a brand that you own and that you're not renting. And so I think that that's where trademarks really comes in. I like to give the examples of if you do, the Lashpreneur, let's keep rolling with your example, the Lashpreneur, right? We're doing education, we start doing merchandise and everybody is on the trail of the Lashpreneur. It's getting big. People are understanding it. They're paying for mentorship, they're paying for merch. They're doing all this stuff. And then you decide that it gets so big that you're like, I just kind of want to step back from it. It's become its own thing. I have these new things I want to work on. Well, the value of your business is going to be so much greater if you actually own that name, the Lashpreneur. than it is without it. Because without it, you have a following and, you know, you've started a business, but you don't own that brand. And so an example I always give is like Beats by Dre, right? Everybody has a pair of like Beats by Dre headphones. Like they're very popular, whatever. Dr. Dre made them big because he's a brand in himself. But, you know, so big that he sold it, right? And made a lot of money when he sold the brand Beats by Dre. But if he had the technology in there, but not the branding, and was like, hey, I'm just going to sell you this no name set of headphones.
Yeah.
Well, it would be equivalent to any other headphones we have out there, right? But it's because of the huge following and trend that came with, you know, Beats by Dre, that when he wanted to sell it, he sold the name. What he really sold was the name and the technology, but the technology by itself would not have been worth as much.
Yeah. And there's something about the reputation you build and the brand recognition in the marketplace that really adds this value that isn't really something you can monetize until you're ready to sell it. Like if we just turned Lashpreneur into Tara Walsh, like people would be confused. They wouldn't have as much power because I've been operating under the Lashpreneur for so long. So yeah, I totally get that. And I think,
and
go ahead.
I was going to say, and if you had, you know, created this, you know, amazing business model or amazing, you know, lash shampoo and conditioner, or, you know, amazing glue under the Lashpreneur, right? And it had like some advanced technology in it. And you went to go sell it to somebody big, like Cody, let's say, you know, or COSMETOLOGIST wanted to buy it, or, you know, whatever, like our big beauty brands are, you know, just having the technology is one thing, but owning the name, you know, is another. It's kind of why like Kylie Cosmetics got real big too.
I was
right.
Kylie Cosmetics.
Kylie Cosmetics got real big. Why? Because she is a brand in herself. And so her being the brand, I mean, the Kardashians can really sell anything they want to, right? They are their own brand. And so her being her own brand, she built Kylie Cosmetics. Every time she drops something, people buy it. So much so that like one of the biggest, you know, beauty retailers that owns CoverGirl, that owns, you know, all of these different things are like, okay, I'm going to buy Kylie Cosmetics. Now, do you think that like her formula is, you know, that special compared to
unique and proprietary?
Right.
That's what makes the difference.
Compared to CoverGirl or compared to any of the other brands that they own? No, it is the brand recognition itself that is valuable. Yeah. And so if she didn't have those trademarks, it would not be nearly as valuable as it was, you know?
I think you touched on a good point, and this is something that it took me a long time to just get used to, was actually reading contracts, understanding what's in your contract. Because if you sign it, whether you understand it or not, you will be held accountable to it. And I see this happening, especially this past year, of people trying to get out of their lease. And oftentimes they'll look at leases, or they'll like share a lease in our program, like there's no termination clause. There's no, you need to give us 30 days notice, or there's no opting out. And so then oftentimes the landlord doesn't have a back to stand on, or the salon owner, because they didn't put in certain clauses that are required in most states for a contract to be even considered a contract. So that was just something that came up for me, as far as like, just start to understand what's normal for contracts, and what may be, you know, if somebody Googles a contract and they just use that as a template, it may not even be enforceable in the state you're in. So that's why it really helps to use a lawyer to even just review your contracts. They don't have to create them, but just start with the review and say, do I have a backbone here or a leg to stand on in case of litigation?
Right. And one of the things, you know, that I'm trying to do, you know, with my brand and with my business, is making the lawyering part of it, or the legal part of the beauty field, more accessible to, you know, your everyday lash artist, your everyday nail tech. Well, I think one of the issues in the beauty industry is they don't see the need for all of the proper stuff, right? They're just like, like, you know, no one's going to sue me, or like, that's not going to happen to me, or, you know, whatever the case is. So I feel like there's a lack of, they don't see the need. There's a lack of understanding the value in it. Yeah. And then when they do understand the value, you know, and lots of people do, the other barrier to getting that legal service or getting that legal help is the cost of it. You know, attorneys are expensive. And so I'm kind of trying to bridge that gap, you know, with what I do on my SHETrademarks platform. I'm kind of, you know, trying to get people to understand why these things are important, and then bridge the gap from, okay, I understand that they're important, to, can I afford it? And so that's kind of what the beauty bundle, you know, my contracts for the beauty entrepreneur is doing, is kind of bridging that gap. Yeah. I also say, you know, it helps with, you know, customized contracts. So if somebody is a, you know, a lash artist and they're like, hey, I keep seeing this happen, and in my particular contract that I'm using for client services, I want this clause in there. Well, for me to review it and add a clause like that, we're, you know, maybe talking, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour, depending on what we're doing. So for you to, you know, buy the template and me to adjust it to your needs is going to be way cheaper than if you go to an attorney and you're like, hey, I want a client services contract for my lash clients from scratch, you know, because then they're like, okay, well, I charge $3.50 an hour. That's probably going to take me 7 hours to do. You're looking at, you know?
Yeah, it's cost prohibitive in that sense. And I agree. I think it's, I mean, 'cause what drives me bananas is I see so many lash artists just taking whatever they've created and selling it on Etsy. And I'm like, oh God, like, unless you are a lawyer, like you legally can't make contracts. It's just,
Right.
You're not licensed to do that. Like the same with accounting, like I can't give legal or accounting advice. And especially because I'm seen as an influencer or an authority, like I could be responsible for anybody getting sued because they used a contract that I said was a contract, even though I'm not licensed. So even just where people get their sources of policies and contracts, it needs to come from a lawyer, preferably in your state. But like you said, if it's a template that you're using, you're going to give education on where they may need to adjust based on the laws in their state or even country. Because I know we have a lot of listeners internationally. Some of the stuff that you may be sharing may not even be a law or something that applies to them in their country. And so it's very specific to states.
Well, you know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, I guess, in the internet realm, right? I'm part of a bunch of different groups for, you know, lash artists on Facebook and, you know, cosmetologists and, you know, the whole kind of gamut. And the amount of incorrect information floating out there is really
terrifying.
Quite interesting.
Terrifying, really.
I mean, there is a lot of bad information out there. Just so far as, you know, I had a question recently from someone, and they said, hey, I keep hearing in my SD group that, you know, you can't charge the full cancellation price if someone cancels, you know, outside of my booking window. And I said, well, where'd they get that information from? You know, and she's like, well, I don't know. That's just what they said. And I'm like, well, there is a lot of stuff that you can contract for in a contract. Okay. And so as long as it's like not inherently illegal, like you're not contracting for something that, you know, is inherently illegal, you know, in most states, if you have in there like cancellation prior to 24 hours is going to be the, you know, full cost of services rendered, and they've signed it and they've acknowledged it, you know, unless there is something that is inherently illegal about that particular clause, you're going to be good to go.
Yeah.
You know,
that's awesome. That's a great tip. Yeah, I think the way that I look at the investment into something like legal, which yes, it can be an overwhelming expense, especially if you're starting off, but I look at it as, is this going to be a part of my livelihood? Because if it's going to be a part of my livelihood, it is on me to make sure that it can protect me and my family for as long as humanly possible. And so it would be irresponsible to just chalk something up as it costs too much, I'll get to it someday, because it could end up costing you your entire ability to be able to provide for yourself. So if you can, with that peace of mind, have protection in place for your business so that you can grow it to whatever level it's going to be, but also have this kind of leg to stand on in the court of law. And especially, I mean, other countries may not be as litigious as we are, and especially you being in California, like everybody sues everybody. It's just the culture that we had in California, and I'm originally from California, so I can say we. But it is, you know, if somebody trips in the parking lot of your studio, they can sue you, they can sue the property company. Like there's just a whole different bunch of ways that you may not be aware. Maybe you didn't specifically do something wrong, but you weren't protected. And then what's that going to mean for your ability to earn an income, for your ability to support your family? I would just rather, if you're going to run a business with the intention that that is going to be your livelihood, then it is your responsibility to make sure it is protected so that you can grow it to whatever it needs to be. And whether it's an investment, right?
It is. And I think you touched on two really good points that I want to make. And one is your livelihood, you know, people being extra litigious, you know, in a lot of the states. And so one thing I think, and I haven't really mentioned yet, is LLCs, okay? Some type of business entity formation. And so how does that work, right? Like how does that actually help me in the event that someone's in my studio and they trip? Okay, well, this is how it works in a nutshell. There's more to it than this, but in the nutshell version of it, you establish an LLC in the state in which you're working, or it can be a different legal entity, but that's, one of the easiest ones to do on your own, and one of the easiest ones to kind of, make sure that you're doing the proper things for and keep it up. Okay. You establish an LLC. That's the first step. But the second step, and one of the ones that people always get messed up, is the finance part of your LLC. And what I mean by that is you can have an LLC under the Lashpreneur, and you're doing all of your business under the Lashpreneur, but you're putting all of your money into your personal account. Your LLC is essentially useless, okay? Because what you're doing is you have an LLC, but you're not running it like a business. And so all of your money is going into your personal account. So under that scenario, somebody comes into your studio, they get their eyelashes done. On their way out, they trip and fall, they break their leg. Okay, now they're suing you, Tara, and the Lashpreneur as well. Well, if you were properly running your LLC like you're supposed to, and you have a business bank account in the business's name, which is very important. Somebody told me they had a business bank account the other day. And I was like, well, good, you're doing great. And then she was like, well, is there a separate, like, actual business bank account I'm supposed to have? I just have a separate personal account that I use for my business expenses. And I said, whoa, two very different things, not a business account. So one of the things is, if you're having a business account, it should be under your business's name. So for example, I have a SHETrademarks business account. It is under SHETrademarks. It is not under Reonna Green that I am just putting money into for, funds that I receive from that business. It is actually in the name SHETrademarks, and it is a business bank account. So in this scenario I went back to, where she breaks her leg in your studio, or in, a booth that you're renting out of a salon suite, if you're putting your money into the LLC, the Lashpreneur's bank account, then she sues the Lashpreneur. She can only get the amount of money that's in your business bank account. So all of your personal assets, that you have that you have gotten up until this point are going to be safe. So, she can't put a lien against your house if your house is worth a certain amount. She's not going to be able to try to put a lien on your car, or take your savings, your personal savings, because you have been running your business under your LLC, and not commingling your funds and doing what you're supposed to do that way.
Because your LLC really just means that you're an employee, so to speak, under the business, and the business is the only assets that the business owns are what's up for rewards for anybody who sues you. Whereas if you don't have an LLC, or you're operating it where you're commingling and just there's not a clear boundary, then all of a sudden your personal assets are up for reward in any sort of lawsuit, which gets really scary.
Up for grabs. Yes, yeah. Gets really scary. So, like, I one of the examples I like to give is, okay, so in this scenario, somebody breaks their leg. You could probably, depending on how it's going to settle, let's say they actually file a lawsuit, you're looking at probably, I would say, broken bone, $80,000 and upwards, in damages. And that's probably on the low end, right? But my point in saying that is, if you are just operating as, Reonna Green, the Lash person, and not an LLC, and all of my money is going into my personal account, and I've been saving now for 3 years to buy a house in California because, prices are crazy, and that's in a savings. Well, if she gets a money judgment for $60,000 against Reonna Green, then she can go walk into Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whoever I bank with, and say, hey, I have this judgment I'm here to collect, essentially, right? Yeah. And so all of your money for your house that you have in your bank account that you plan to use can be gone. Yeah. If you are operating under the Lashpreneur and all your money's going there, and she gets an $80,000 settlement amount or settlement award, and she goes in to say, hey, I want to enforce this against Tara, they're going to be like, this says it's enforceable against the Lashpreneur. And then she's like, okay, well, yeah, I want to enforce it against the Lashpreneur. And maybe you only have 10 grand in there. Well, then she can have the 10 grand, but that's what the business has. So it's about what the business owns versus what you own individually. And so I think that's really important. People need to protect themselves in that way as well. And then the second thing would be professional liability insurance. So in both of our scenarios, if they had professional liability insurance, they're going to tap in first. So they're going to help out with trying to get your claim settled. You know, you pay into it every month. So if she gets $60,000 in settlement, and you have a policy of $100,000, no money's coming out of your pocket. The insurance is going to pay it like they would if you have a car, you know, and you get in a car accident. So it's one of those things where I say people act like they don't need professional liability insurance because it's kind of sometimes like oh, I don't need it. You know,
I'd rather
nothing's
pay
going to
myself
happen.
than pay insurance.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the same thing with car insurance, right? You don't need it until you need it. And then when you need it, you are so happy that you had it. You get in a car accident and $20,000 to your car, $20,000 to their car. They went and they saw a chiropractor, you know, and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I have this. I'm not out 80 grand.
Yeah.
Versus if you don't have it and you are. So I think that's something else people need to look into is making sure they get professional liability insurance. It's not that expensive and everyone needs it.
And it's really a difference between running a business and having a hobby.
Right. Yeah. It's, you know, how are you treating your business? Are you running your business like a business person? Like this is your livelihood that, you know, you are establishing, you know, for the years to come, for the future. It helps pay your mortgage, you know, or are you a hairstylist, lash artist, nail tech that does it on the side? And, you know, it doesn't really matter to you if you get closed down tomorrow because, you know, it's just a hobby to you.
Yeah, it really can't. I mean, that mindset alone of like, am I treating this like a business or am I treating it like a hobby? If you want your business to take care of you, you got to take care of it. It's just as simple as that.
Right.
This conversation was so good. And we could just keep going on and on. We'll probably have you on again. Tell people where they can learn more about you, the services they offer. Where can we find you online?
Sure. Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm under SHETrademarks, SHE, and then trademarks just as it's spelled. You know, my brand is really about like women entrepreneurs, the beauty business. That's really my focus. It's kind of both of my passions combined. So, you know, one of the things that I am working on that I have got to just, everything is finished, but my website needs to go live. So I want the process to be really easy for, you know, my clients, my beauty professionals, is the beauty bundle I mentioned a couple of times. It's going to have all your templates. I've also drafted policies and kind of canned responses to your certain situations that happen a lot. So your mad client, you know, who is like, I can't believe you're charging me this cancellation policy. You know, I kind of have 3 different canned responses in there. So one of the ones is like, you know, if they were polite, like, well, I understand you have this cancellation policy. Can you please waive it this time? You know, and there's a response for that, depending on kind of how you want to go. If you want to offer 1 free waiver, you know, whatever. And then if they're like, this is outrageous, you know,
I'm going to write a bad review.
Yeah, there's a response for that. If they're, you know, if they're just irate, there's a response for like, well, you know, you have to pay this and I will not be rebooking you until you do, you know, I mean, those kind of situations. And then all the other kind of contracts we talked about, even like wedding contracts, if you're going to do day of wedding services, lashes, makeup, whatever, that's going to be in there. So you're talking about travel expenses to and there, what you're including as free travel and what isn't free travel, you know, kind of your radius, all those kind of things are going to be in those beauty bundles that are getting ready to drop as soon as it's going to be easy for everybody to be able to go see what they like, purchase it, and then get the contracts instantly. The cool thing about the beauty bundles, I will say, is if you buy the bundle, I'm going to update them, you know, regularly and revise them. And if you have bought the bundle and I change it in 6 months or add a new contract that somebody was asking me for, you're going to get access to that. And so I think that's something really cool. Laws change. So instead of having to pay an attorney to make sure that your contract is legally up to date, I'm going to do that for you. And then trademark services are on there too. If you want consultations, if you're like, I am ready to treat my business and be a boss, you know, like be a real boss and not treat it like a hobby. Those are on there too. Everything is under SHETrademarks. And there's, you know, a link on there, very easy to book a consultation. You know, even if you want to do, I've been doing kind of brand audits. So if you're like, hey, this is how I'm running my brand legally, do you see any issues? The answer almost always is yes. And then what are those issues? You know, then I can kind of tell you about that. We can talk about, you know, ways to, you know, better protect yourself legally and your business legally.
Love it. We will link all of that up in the show notes. Reonna, thank you so much
Perfect.
for sharing your wisdom. Definitely want to keep in touch and talk more about those beauty bundles, especially when they're ready. I would love to get that out to our audience as much as possible. And support them.
Yes, that would be great. I think it will really be helpful for everyone. And this has been, a lot about the legal stuff. So I would say you're probably doing good boss stuff over there.
Learning trial by fire. It's not the most glamorous side of running a business, but it's one of those necessities that you just kind of got to adapt to and adjust and learn as you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, great. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, everyone, have a good one.